Good morning and Happy New Year to everyone, and welcome to Jump's Recruitment Discussions 2023. Wow. There's been an awful lot of talk about 2023, whether or not we'll be in recession or not. So suppose if you think you're going to go into recession, you're right. If you don't think we're going to have a recession, you're right. No matter what the connotation of what it is, whatever you think, that's correct. At Jump, we're definitely thinking about growth, and we're looking to deliver growth to our clients. And so our webinars, we're going to talk about how we can look at growth. And so this series, we're going to kick off with building a rookie production line and how to create a winning team. So as always, we'll start with a few stats based on what's happening. And these are stats that came from last year. So they're up to date with what's going on. So nearly 59% of all employees claimed they had no workplace training, and most of their skills were self-taught. 74% of workers are willing to learn new skills in order to remain employable, and 87% of millennials believe learning and development in the workplace is the most important thing for them. Only 29% of employees are very satisfied with their current career advancement opportunities and availabilities within their organization, and 41% of employees consider their organization career advancement opportunity as a very important factor for their job satisfaction. 70% of employees would be somewhat or like to leave their current employer if another employer would invest in their learning and development. 34% of employees who left their previous job were motivated by career development and training opportunities with a new employee. 59% of managers who oversee one or two employees report having no management training whatsoever, and 41% of managers who oversee 3 to 5 employees claim the same. 89% of employees who want training, they want it available at any time and online, and 85% of employees want to choose the times that they can train to fit into their schedule. Wow. So building a rookie production line and building a high performance team encapsulates all of that. This week I'm joined by Paul and Dave. Heather is on site in Leeds. So Happy New Year to Paul and Dave. And again, Happy New Year to everybody else. So let's kick off. Let's kick off with a nice, easy question, as always. Okay. When creating a winning team, where do you start?
When creating a winning team, where do you start? That's such an easy question.
Oh, I thought so. Let's kick off a nice easy one.
2023. Thank you very much. I'm sure Dave appreciates it as much as I do. Where do you start? Well, it starts from the top. It's making sure that you've got the right leadership, creating the culture that I think brings people into the business, embraces people, excites them. The company has a vision, a plan for the future, that people understand where they can take their career. This is particularly pertinent to this subject matter, not just where they are right now, but where they can be in 2023 and beyond. Understanding the what's in it for me. And I think it's about being supportive. It's about being capable of giving people what they seek from their career without the need to go elsewhere. It's about having fun. I could go on. It's really about that thing we've often referred to as EVP, and making sure that you create an environment that's seductive for people. They want to be a part of it, that helps to bring in new people, and obviously retains the great talent that you train and develop over many years.
Yeah, I think Paul's spot on. And actually, at the very beginning, Paul, what you said, it starts with you. So Happy New Year, everybody. I've missed your stats, Howard. Our kids were opening their presents on Christmas Day, and I had 4% open with their left hand and 11% with their right hand and all of that. I had to have some stats while I was off for Christmas, so I came up with them.
Then the number of kids that you have, Dave, that must have been 44 left hands.
Yeah. The stats are always good to kick us off. I think it is. It starts with you. So I would think it's about mentality. So do you, as a person who is leading your business, do you have what you would consider to be a winning mentality? And the way to recognize that, I guess, is to look back in your own career and in your own life and think, well, what's worked? When I've been winning, and whatever you define winning as, when I've been winning, what is it about me that has made me think I'm winning, that has given me that mentality, that winning mentality, and then try to think of that for your business, and then how that will benefit each of your teams. Because if you exude that mentality, or that winning mentality, that confidence, that acknowledgement, that feedback, if you're exuding that in your team, then the leaders that work alongside you and follow you will pick that up, and then it transfers to the desk as well. Or you could look at it and go, well, who are the in 2022, who are my stars? What was it in their DNA that made them winners, as opposed to perhaps those that weren't quite as strong? And pick up on that and look to build on those facets of that mentality as you kick off 2023, and then you'll kind of embrace that winning mentality.
I think when I started to think about this year, the stat that jumped out to me there was 59%, so nearly 60% of managers who oversee 1 or 2 employees have had no training whatsoever on developing their staff, managing their staff, coaching their staff, which leads you to sort of think, if that's the level of managers that haven't had any training, then the level of leaders that have also had 0 training must be reasonably high to train and develop people. And so you're right, that is where you would start to look at and say, are you fit for purpose? Are you fit to actually deliver and train and develop your staff? Do you know what that good looks like? Do you know what bad looks like? And I think it was important when we start to think that nearly 59% of all employees right across the workforce, this isn't just recruitment, right across the workforce, and I would think that is highest stat in recruitment, have had no workplace training. So it sort of says that, as an industry, we are really performing at an extremely high level, considering the lack of training that we've actually had within that marketplace. So I think, when we start to build and create winning teams, we start at the top and then start to filter down and look at how we can build and develop training processes into those to ensure that we can perform at a higher level. And I think that's where we kick off constantly to make sure that we can constantly perform at a higher level rather than just, perform. And I think there's a very difference between a high level performance and just performing, and the difference between sort of great and brilliant is a fine line, and it usually comes from that extra training that you deliver. So here's a question then, when we start to think about that. Finding talent is extremely hard, and it's only getting harder. So how do you increase your chance of not only finding new consultants, but finding consultants that will add benefit to the business?
Well, I think one of the things that I think over the last few years, particularly 2022, that enabled us to get rid of a particular myth was this point about you must have previous recruitment experience. I mean, how many times over the years have we seen organizations looking for people purely because they've got some background in the industry? I think last year, finally, people came around to the view that actually this was a pretty futile exercise, trying to find great people that fit the culture. We made reference to the culture a moment ago of your business, which is a very, very important criteria, who are able to bring benefit to the business at the right salary. Because, I mean, let's be honest, really good quality people working for competitors should be or should have had their salaries and benefits taken care of. In other words, they're anchored to the business. So drawing those kind of people out, bringing them into your business is not an easy thing, unless, of course, they're very miserable or unhappy, et cetera, which can happen. But trying to entice good quality people to leave a business where they're doing well is not an easy prospect. And if they come purely for the money, we know that that's a big red flag, because one might accuse them of being mercenary, and they may well do the same to you in due course. And I think last year, because it was so difficult to find sufficient numbers of people with previous experience who've ticked all the boxes I've just explained, we came round to the view that we had to train our own. We had to go out into the market, find people that had transferable skill sets and the right personalities and behaviors and values, and bring them into our business. And I think that when you focus on this point, finding people with the right behaviors and values, people with the right personalities, and we look at emotional intelligence, EQ, as the two most important factors when we're looking to bring people into an organization, rather than previous experience and qualifications, then we stand a decent chance of finding people that can come in and over a period of time really be of great benefit to the organization. I've always said none of us were born, as it were, recruitment consultants. At some stage, every single person listening into this webinar, and we included, were invited into recruitment. It typically, if you ask a group of people to put their hands in the air, did they deliberately want to get into recruitment? You'd probably be lucky if 1 or 2 out of 10 put their hands up. Most of us, for one reason or another, found ourselves in recruitment, but none of us were born, as it were, recruitment consultants. We all have, however, certain attributes that have enabled us to be successful in this industry. And that's what you're looking for. People that exhibit the kind of behaviors and values and personalities, emotional intelligence that we have, our colleagues have, the successful people in our business, and you're bringing those people in and developing and training them from scratch. That isn't, and we're going to talk about it, I'm sure, that bigger hill to climb. But looking for people with previous experience, I hope that myth has kind of disappeared over the last 18 months.
Joanne, I'll pick up with that question in a minute. Dave?
Yeah, the second part of that question was who will add benefits to the business? The reality is, as good as we are as recruiting, we don't know whether the new people we will hire will add benefit. We don't know how they'll fit into the culture. We do everything we can at interview stage, even using psychometrics and assessment centres. But the reality is we are always, aren't we, constantly surprised that so-and-so didn't make it and yet somebody else did. So I think you've just got to accept you do the best that you can once you get them, but you don't know from on day one. You hope, but you don't always know. The way that or one of the ways that you increase your chances of attracting people to your business is about your personal story. But younger people, particularly younger people, if we're talking about juniors, that's normally where we go, although a lot of people are having success with older people and getting them back into the workforce and joining recruitment companies. But in general, people buy into stories. People buy into your story, why you set your business up, what you hope to achieve, what your purpose is. So the way you attract people to your business is to get your story out, be it on LinkedIn, be it with different posts, be it with messages, be it speaking at events. But if you want to grow your business in 2023, you're in tough competition for fewer people. Get out there and start to tell your story and say, look, I'm looking for 2 or 3 people, 1 or 2 people, whatever that number is, 10 people, to join me on this journey. This is what my journey is. This is what I'm doing. And this is where you fit into it. And we'd love you to join us. And as Paul said earlier, you'll attract people who aren't from the recruitment sector, and you'll get them. You'll find the ones that you want, and you weed through the ones that you don't want. But make yourself and your story more visible in this first quarter of 2023 if you're looking to hire this year, because that's how you'll get people connecting with you. That's a great
idea.
I think, when I looked at this question, it was about recruiting the right people, and then it was about how you add benefit. And I think the first benefit that you add is by recruiting the right people. And Joanne's put there, she's gone full remote, and she's for ease has looked at seasoned recruiters. The second half of that question about how do you develop people without recruitment experience will answer all the way through this webinar. But I think the first thing is that you need to be really strict with your recruitment process. And I always think that the 2 things that should never change in your business are your values and how you live those values within your business. You can change your targets, you can change your modus operandi, etc. But if you forever weaken the values of the people that you bring into the business, then they're never going to add value to your business. You're always going to get problems. And it's about getting the people with the right values and the right will to do the job, and then providing them with the right skills to be able to deliver what you want them to deliver. So I think to me, to increase your chance, you've got to become even more disciplined in recruiting the right people into your business, and not just taking people who've got an opportunity or a skill set that you think will add. It's finding people with the right value set, the right behavioral set to actually do the right things. Once you get those people, then training them should be fairly simple, because they've got the will and desire to actually probably be self-learners, self-developers, as well as the training that you can add to them. But to me, it's all about having the right values and the right behaviors in the first place. That way, you're going to start to increase your opportunity to build and build and build, rather than always having that problem where you've got a disgruntled employee, and as we said back in COVID time, that becomes a terrorist in your business and starts to tear your business up. I think we have to become more disciplined in finding the right people, and not just taking anybody, because it's hard to find people just because we want to fill a seat. And I think we've got to get that in our heads, rather than sort of just take maybe people, because that causes a massive problem and affects time, revenue, and cost. And they're the things that, are going to be really important this year. And that's the thing we've got to sort of move away from. So the question then, we know that across the recruitment industry, most companies have, make very little from a new recruit in year one. So how do we increase the chances of getting more new recruits into year two and beyond?
I think this is a big question. There's little point in bringing people into your business, and even if they are experienced people, unless you're going to invest time and energy into them. And that's especially true of new people. There has to be a well-considered L&D plan for people. The other thing I'd add to this, and because I often work with recruitment businesses that do have a very detailed induction plan and ongoing L&D plan. Sometimes, however, I find myself, and I'm sure the people listening will understand this, talking and trying to coach people who are clearly not very interested in learning. You can see it, especially if you're in the room with them. They just don't seem open-minded, don't seem to want to take on board new lessons. And with all due modesty, if they're not going to learn from somebody like me with nearly 50 years of working in the industry, it's reasonable to assume they're just not interested in opening their minds. So I think one of the things you've got to be looking for with people when you bring them in is their thirst for knowledge, their thirst for understanding new things, and having the resilience to keep trying, especially in the first 3 to 6 months when everything feels very difficult and overwhelming and clunky. We know that the first 3 to 6 months are the most, if you like, dangerous period for people when they join us. It's the point at which we either capture their hearts and minds or we don't. And if we don't capture those hearts and minds in the first 3 to 6 months, there's a reasonably decent chance they're not going to make the grade, and or they're going to leave the business, and or we will ask them to leave the business. So that first 3 to 6 month period is vital. And so for me, it really is about making sure that we are very clear about our objectives when we recruit. Dave made a great point, not just about filling seats. We have to make sure that the people we bring into the business tick as many boxes as we can possibly get them to tick. And that relates to the points we've made, behaviors and values. It relates to emotional intelligence, and so forth, but it definitely relates to a thirst for wanting to learn our industry. Everyone thinks recruitment's easy until they try it. How many times have we all had that experience of working with people who think that it's just going to be a walk in the park, and they don't realize just how tough it's going to be? So I think it's not just about having a detailed plan for the first 3 to 6 months and thereafter, but it's also about being very selective, to Dave's point, about the people we bring into the business. That then talks to the entire recruitment process, which perhaps we'll talk about shortly.
I think, I think when I look back on those that have worked alongside me who have succeeded versus those that haven't, there isn't always just one reason. There's obviously lots of reasons, but one of the things that stood out has always been those that have had success early have stayed longer. So for me, it would be if you hired a whole load of new people, rookies, returners, whatever, where in your business is there low-hanging fruit that they can earn from, that they can get closer to the candidates or closer to the clients with? Because the moment they get that little taste for success, placing your first candidate, winning a campaign, whatever it is that they do that brings them success, or whatever it is that your company does that brings success, the sooner you can get your trainees or new people to taste that success, the better. If you manage them well, if you coach them well, if you train them well and you develop it, there's a good sense of fun, a sense of purpose, all the things we spoke about. But if they have success as well, they're more likely to stay. So I would say, look for some low-hanging fruit. There may be deals that you could do quite easily, but actually give it to one of the newbies. Let them work alongside you and give them the success of that deal. It's not going to cost you a lot, but actually it will give them that appetite for, oh, I quite like this. I like placing people into jobs, and the success that brings, and the success that it brings in those individual people's lives. And once they get a taste for it, then if they're going to be good and they're going to enjoy the culture that they're working in, they're more likely to stay. So yeah, your question is, it does take a while for those people to be successful. But as I always say, and I'll use it again, success and strategy is episodic. It isn't annual. So you can't look at them and go, after a year they haven't made much. What about the first few months? What does success look like in the first few months? Is it qualifying a candidate? Is it getting that candidate to the consultant? Is it speaking to some clients? Well, whatever that is, bring it forward as fast as you can, because the sooner they're performing, the better and faster they'll learn and stay.
So I think to try and answer Jeanette's question, and to sort
I've
of
just
push
put an
on.
answer up there as well.
Okay. So I was working with a company last week and just finishing off the stuff this week with them, where we've built a 13-week training plan where they have an hour's training every Monday. Then they have online training that they can access from there. And then on Friday, they have a catch-up where they present back to their management team what they've learned. But it's the basics of recruitment going from cradle to grave. So what you would do, so you build them up. And I think to get a better return on investment from them quicker, if we bring people in, and we all know that the big problem that we've got in recruitment at the moment is there aren't any candidates, get them to start to build and develop candidates for the roles that they're working. As you said, Paul, get them filling the easiest jobs and working alongside consultants to get them an early taste of success. But by giving them short periods of training and development, and then getting them to mirror and match consultants. And so again, it's setting up that consultant to say, this week we've done this training. So on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I want you to spend an hour every day doing that purely with that consultant in the morning and the afternoon. It seems to develop the new consultant really, really quickly. So to get them through into year two, again, we have to give them that touch of success really early and have structured training all the way through. That first 13 weeks is just about candidates. The next 13 weeks is then about developing the client base and working from there. So what we've got to start to think is that if we are going to do those things and bring consultants in, then we have to have a really good training and development platform, both internally and externally, to enable people to learn and develop. And I'll go back to that position, that quote, 59% of employees claim they have no workforce, no workplace training. 59% of managers have no training to manage people. So if you think that is critical, then why aren't we building those type of platforms and building those things? So bite-sized training and development constantly, plus other things. So with other clients, I've put 2-day training courses in for, this is the cradle to grave recruitment, and then built a 13-week platform. So I think there's all sorts that you can do, and it depends on the company, it depends on the amount of people in the company to do that. But if you don't train your people and other people will, then they leave. And that is what the stats are all saying, that 98% of people want training and will leave to go elsewhere if they haven't had that training. And I think that is
Yeah, and Howard, I think just to pick up on your point, a couple of points. There's no point in teaching people to do certain things. For example, business development techniques with face-to-face with clients, if you're not going to ask them to do that anytime soon, because by the time they, further down the line it comes around that they're going to be speaking to clients, they can't remember anything they were taught 3 months back. So to your point, and you're absolutely right, if you're going to train them on, for example, sourcing candidates, how to use LinkedIn effectively, how to use the database correctly, and so forth, then you get them immediately that day to do the things you've trained them to do. And then you keep doing that until they've perfected that, and then you move on to the next things, like any other form of training.
So what we built is a timeline. So I sat with the client and we built a timeline. What would you normally be doing in these? Then we built the timeline based on what recruitment is actually about. So the first week it's about what would you initially do if you were a brand new job, and get that all the way through that process. And it was really interesting listening to the client talk about, oh my God, I've never thought about doing that. I've never thought about putting that in there. I've never thought about this. And all of a sudden they start to see a whole new opportunity about, this isn't investing a massive amount of time, inverted commas. It's about investing short chunks of time that really makes the consultant learn and develop, then giving them the capability of learning by themselves, and then giving them the position at the end of the week to present back. And that's the bit that I always feel, if I'm working with Dave and I teach Dave 10 things, and on Friday he can recite 9 of those things or 8 of those things back to me, I know my training has really worked, and I know that Dave has understood what's going on and it's starting to work. Okay. However, if Dave can only recite 2 or 3 of those things back to me, then I know I've got to look at my training first before I look at Dave, and then develop that. But if I'm training things that Dave's not going to work for another 6 weeks, another 8 weeks, then you're right, Paul. He's never going to pick it up because he's never using it. He never gets the practical experience.
Your argument does come apart, though, because your example here is about training Dave.
Dave, correct.
We know that's entirely futile.
I don't have the capacity to learn 10 things. One thing I would say about training, and I think it's an important point, is as we hire different people, we need to understand what their learning styles are, because sometimes as leaders we assume that everybody will learn the same way, and they don't. Some people are much more visual. We're going to hire people from outside our industry, so they're going to have a lot of different experiences. So just giving them a PowerPoint or a talk or something, that may not be the best way for them as individuals. So Jeanette's point about doing bite-sized training, I think works well. I grew up in the era of Tom Peters, and Tom Peters in Search of Excellence and all of that. He used to talk about management by wandering around, literally little bits of training, little bits of guest stuff at the desk relevant to that person. It's a bit more difficult, of course, when you're in a hybrid working or you've got people working from home, but you can still check in on them. 15-20 minutes.
But that's you're right. And I remember I grew up, and I know Claire Ashby's on the call, and she's going to laugh at this. But Tony Byrne, when I grew up, was was the trainer. As he's walking around in his big red braces and what have you. And I think that we've got to start to think that people do have different learning styles, and that's the idea. You have classroom based, visual based, on the job based. You have web-based, but then reciting it back, because no one learns more than the person that's got to recite it back, because you don't want to feel stupid, so you're going to do that. So to move on, because we've got loads to cover. Quick question then. In your opinion, why do so many recruiters leave in the first 12 months or not make it through the first 12 months?
2 answers. Number one, we've taken on the wrong person. So, you made the point earlier, Dave, about desperately recruiting. If we've got the wrong person because our recruitment process hasn't really been finessed correctly, and we've taken someone on that doesn't match our behaviors and values, whose lack of emotional intelligence is very evident, and so forth. It's number one reason. They just aren't right for us or the industry. The second thing we've been talking about, which is, even if we've recruited the right person, but we're not applying ourselves to developing them, and that's particularly, as we said earlier, something to be very mindful of in the first 12 to 16 weeks, then there's another reason why people will leave. The third, I guess, is if they cannot see how they're going to develop their careers. Because if you've ticked the first two boxes, you've got the right person and you're doing the correct coaching and training, but you haven't managed to imbue them with a sense of excitement about your business, so that you're not aware of their ambition and they're not aware of where the business can take them. There's the third reason.
So I'm going to say something slightly provocative here. A lot of people talk about careers when they join recruitment companies, but actually they're not interested in long-term careers because society today doesn't teach them to think about long-term. They think about, I'll join a company, and if it works out in the next 12 months, that's great. If it doesn't, I'll go traveling. If it doesn't, I'll go and be a fireman. If it doesn't, I'll go and be a PT or go and join another recruitment company. I see that a lot in a lot of younger people are hired. So therefore, to make them successful and to hold on to them, make sure that the culture allows them to perform. Because if they perform and they feel good about themselves and they feel good about the company, they're more likely to stay. But I just question, I'm not saying that that it's wrong, I just question this idea about hiring people and think they're going to be with you for 5 or 10 years, because I don't think people think that like that today.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
I think people think 12 months. I mean, I met somebody who joined a company in November. I remember chatting to him at the coffee room, and I have to be here. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, hopefully it worked for me in the next 6 months. And I'm thinking, God, you cost us a bit to hire you. You know, we're going to train you, we're going to develop you, and you're thinking 6 months. He absolutely wasn't thinking about a career. But who knows? I mean, he's still there, but who knows? I think we've got to make sure that we align ourselves to where they're at. And that can be difficult when you're trying to grow a business, knowing how expensive it is to hire people.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to the comment that I always talk to my clients about, is make your business a hard place to get into, but then make it a harder place to leave.
Yeah, good
you start to think after 6 months, what happens is the R2R starts circling around, and they're offering all these consultants, you know, you're on 23, you're on 24 at the moment, you're on 20K at the moment, we can get you 5K, 10K more just because they've got 6 months experience. But if you're known for a really good training and development program, you're going to get that all the time. But by having a really good training and development program, what you're doing is telling to your consultants that, you know, if you leave, you're unlikely to get this type of thing. So you make it a hard place to leave, where if you're not training them, you just throw them in the deep end and hope they sink or swim, you know, and someone comes and offers them, you know, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 more, guess what? They leave. And that's the thing that we've got to get to understand, is that we are the reason why they are leaving, but we should also be the reason why they are staying. So I think we've got to start to think that people leave because we do not invest in them. And that's what everyone's saying, that, you know, people will stay if you invest. They leave where people feel they'll get their investment in them. So talking about investment, yeah, we invest time, management, training, and equipment. It's not cheap, especially in the first sort of 3 to 6 months of a new person. So how do you get a new starter to pay his way or pay her way or hit break even in the first 13 weeks?
Oh, that's a really tough question. And I'm not sure that we should have an expectation that they're going to break even in the first 13 weeks, to be honest. I mean, it's lovely if they're contributing and they've made, they've perhaps assisted with some placements in the first 3 months. That's tremendous. I think what we're looking for is absolute evidence that they're growing, they're developing, and that I mean, Howard, if you'd have asked me this question, if you'd have said in the first 6 months, I would have given you a slightly different answer. But I would say in the first 12 to 13 weeks, I'm not expecting them necessarily to break even. I don't think that's my expectation. What I do want to see, as I said, is real progress, in a sense that they want to learn, that they're keen, they're enthusiastic, and we're on the verge of seeing some productivity. If I'm writing budgets for brand new staff, to be honest, when I write a budget, I might put in one placement, but not much more than one in the first 3 months. And that is probably not going to get us, well, it may get you to some degree close to breaking even on salary, but it's unlikely. So for me, it's not about expecting some kind of great investment and return on investment in the first 3 months. It's much more a longer term view, certainly in the first 6 months. And I'm, you know, for me, it's about making sure that within that first 13 weeks, we've got somebody on board that we're really pleased with, that we feel is really making some decent advancement.
And yeah, I mean, I think 13 weeks it's really tough to get someone to be contributing net positively if you're looking at it purely in financial terms.
Yeah.
If you're looking at it in terms of team dynamic, team culture, how they're fitting in, are they here for the long term? And long term at the moment is 12 months. You know, are they going to stay with you? Then they can make a positive contribution to the team in 13 weeks. And then if they start to have some success, and then they start to enjoy it, and then they stay. Jeanette's point earlier about going for rookies, I think is the way that many recruitment companies, be they those with just 5 staff or 50 staff, they're growing their own. They're looking to grow their own because they create their own culture. They create the people that are molded into the way that they work with the other people along with that they work with, and then they tend to have much greater success. So yeah, for me, I think 13 weeks, that's a tough one.
Yeah, and I think
6 months they should have done a couple of deals, yeah. and also find out, do your clients and candidates enjoy working with them? If they haven't spoken to a client in six months, actually you're doing something wrong. Get them out speaking to clients, get them to engage with more than just the people that they're working with. And then find out what your clients say. How could they ask your client? How were they with you? What kind of training do you think they need? Get them out, get them on, going on double meetings, even on Zoom, you know, to do stuff with them so they can enjoy.
So I think there's a question here that sort of is broached, that our traditional thinking is based on the 360 recruiter. And based on the 360 recruiter, I have no issue in what you two have just said whatsoever about getting people up and running and how that works. However, you know, I have a different view that I think that as people come into the marketplace, is that candidate generation is really important. And if you start the person on candidate generation, at that same time, they can start to build their own patch, they build their own environment, they build their own client marketplace, you know, but they're working jobs that will be fillable with consultants, they're finding candidates for other consultants that have got jobs on. They can start to make reasonable, I suppose, productivity moving forward and generating fees reasonably quickly, because the candidates that they're finding, the consultants we're putting forward to that job, irrespective whether they've got recruitment experience or not, because they've still got to build their patch. And I think you start to see people have a different sort of view set. So, you know, I'm working with a couple of clients that are sort of have been trialing this, and what they're finding is that they're getting 2 or 3 placements after 13 weeks, but they're not self-generated. They're the candidates that they've found to place into requirements that maybe not have been filled, or help fill requirements, and the consultant then can fill other requirements that they've got on. It's about, and what I can't remember which one said about the time that you invest. And so if you're going to invest in 360, yes, I'd expect 1 placement, maybe 2 or 3 after 6 months. But if you invest purely in the candidate side and then teach them and develop them the client side further down the line, then we'll start to see a better return on investment quicker, and maybe they start to hit break even as a run rate after that 13 weeks. But it is about generating the candidates, gaining the knowledge of your marketplace, and building a client base that they can develop from there, rather than coming in and saying, build a client base. Then once you've got the client base and you get jobs, then start to build a candidate database. But we could be using those candidates straight away to fill other jobs. So I think it's about a mentality type of thing, and it's about what we're trying to do. But it still says you want to spend a really good 6 months developing, training them, and the expectation is different, but the productivity is something that they can start to produce reasonably quickly if we look at where we need our productivity most in a company, which at the moment is candidate generation. And I think there's an argument between then about the 360, 180 model, what works, what doesn't work, and where you actually get that first, you know, touch and that first tip of excitement where you start to make placements. And if you can do that in the first 3 to 6 weeks, because you start to generate CVs for consultants to fill, that starts to give you that. and that really starts to give you that. And that's a very different view. When I first started, 3 months, you had to make your own generated placement. And that was really hard work. And lots of people fail because of that. And I think we've got to change our mindset for that. So to take it sort of full thing, creating a succession plan of great consultants doesn't sort of happen by accident. So how, as a business leader, do you create a productive environment that enables everybody to flourish?
I believe you've got to really express your ambition as an organization, to have a really exciting vision, so that people not only want to join the business, so the glossy brochure that they see, as it were, when you interview them, is backed up by the experience they have when they join the business. If we talk about being ambitious and wanting to get to X level, or take on more staff, or develop our organizational structures and offer career opportunities to people, then that's something that has to be experienced when they join the organization. And I guess the best ambassadors for any business are not necessarily the people that are at the top leading the business, but the individuals working in the organization. If your colleagues consistently talk about what a wonderful place it is to work, how great it is to be in the business, how brilliant the leaders are, how supportive everybody is, and so on, that's very contagious. If you're working alongside others with similar experience, or people that have been in the business for many years, and you can see, because it's very obvious, that they're happy, that they love the organization, they love the culture, they're very much part of that culture, that they have developed a very good level of income, that they've been able to develop their careers and so forth, then I think that encourages people not only to join, but to stay. And just come back to a point Dave made earlier. I started in the Alfred Marks Bureau 100 years ago at the age of 19. And we talk about this generation, but I think, as Dave was talking, I was thinking back to what my mindset was when I was 19 years old. And I think I probably joined Alfred Marks thinking I'll give it a go. I don't think I was thinking I'm going to be there for 11 years, which is what happened. I just thought I'll give it a go. It looks interesting, looks enjoyable. Let's see what happens. The thing was that the culture there was so enjoyable and fascinating and hilarious and all the other things that I could go on and on about, that once I was in, I wasn't going to leave. I loved it. And I could also see, and it was very clear, that if I got my head down and did well, I'd be promoted. I'd have a chance of managing my own office and developing and so forth. So I think that the culture there was entirely correct. But I certainly didn't join the business thinking I was going to be there for a long time. So I think it's making sure that the people around the people you bring in are exhibiting the behaviors and values that you've already stated are important when you interview people in the first instance.
I think also, to add to Paul's point, I think go back to what I was saying earlier about tell stories. So the stories of success. So who are the consultants in your business that have had success? What does it look like? How did they do it? Get them to tell their stories to the new people coming in, and make it practical, make it real, make it visible, so that they can enjoy listening and then put it into action. And the other thing in terms of success for me is get them out to see clients. We as recruitment leaders are much more reticent about putting our people onto client sites with clients than our clients are about receiving them. With a really good story, you can take somebody with 3 or 4 months experience to a client and say, this person's only got 2 or 3 months experience. They're just joining me on this meeting. 99% of clients are going to go, yeah, that's fine. I understand that, because that's how we do it. But most recruiters don't do that. They don't want to expose them to the client in case they mess up. Let them mess up. Give them the freedom to fail as soon as they can, because once they fail, if they're good, they won't do it again. And if you train them right, they won't do it again. And then they get that taste for success, and that's how you get them to stay, hopefully longer than perhaps they would ordinarily stay.
I think it's that when you start to think, I was thinking back about my career. I stayed 9 years at my first recruitment agency, and 9 years at the second, nearly 10 years at the second. And I think it's that where you feel that you are adding value and you feel that you are valued is what I felt was really important. That in both those companies, I feel really valued, and leaving both those companies was quite a big step for me to move, especially leaving the first company was a huge step. And I was really, very torn about leaving or not. But it's about creating that environment where people feel comfortable to express themselves without the fear of retribution, and they feel that they've got the autonomy to deliver within a certain framework, their own in their own style, rather than sort of that factory driven, do this. And that's what I enjoyed. I enjoyed that freedom, and I enjoyed that there. But what it was about, the people around me, and it was about having really good people. And you could certainly see where you'd had someone who was maybe not particularly very nice within the office, how they really had a ripple effect across the office. And you saw the people gravitate to people that gave them, their support and the help that they needed. And it was interesting watching how that sort of panned itself out as you start to become more and more experienced. And you're right what you're saying, Paul, the experienced people stepping back and helping the inexperienced and helping everyone to grow, and creating that sort of a symbiotic environment where everyone helps each other is really important, rather than creating elitism. And I think that's what recruitment is great at doing, is creating elitism within there and putting certain people on pedestals and highlighting them on pedestals, and other people then are fearful to even approach and talk to some of these people. I think it is about making that as a really sort of homely and wholesome sort of environment where people can flourish. And I think that's the big sort of change that we've got to look at. So one last question, and let's make it quick. Okay. What's the one thing that you would focus on as a leader to ensure your investment in staff produces a great return in investment?
The answer in a word is time. You've got to be prepared to put time into people, into the new people particularly. That, as you've just said correctly, Howard, I mean, that's not just about coaching and training, but it's about spending time as a, if you like, as a human being alongside people. And you made the point here about others in the organization coming forward and taking ownership and responsibility for coaching and nurturing and mentoring new people. So buddy systems, as we've talked about in the past, are a great method of ensuring that people feel supported and not overwhelmed, particularly in their first 13, 16 weeks. The answer is time. If you are going to bring people into your business, you've got to be prepared to put time and energy into them. The thought that you can just give them a bit of quick training, there you go, there's your desk, crack on, that's just nonsense, and it's just a waste of money. And we can't really get the best out of people unless we're prepared to take a medium to long term view about them. The earlier point about, can we make money out of them in the first 13 weeks? No, let's not even think about that. Let's make sure that over a period of 6 months to 12 months, we're in a decent place with them. But you have to have a medium to long term view about people. And that's all about time and energy, placing resources, being prepared to go the extra mile to support new people. I will add one thing here, and I know it's not a positive, but if you have got the wrong people and you've realized you've got the wrong people, and it's happened to everybody on this webinar, then make your call quick. Don't hang around, waste energy and time on people that are clearly not going to make the grade or aren't really interested, or to Joanna's unfortunate situation, they're using you. When you see it, call it, move on fast. Don't let it hang around for too long.
Right, H, and I'm going to go all 80s pop music, Gary Davis. I'm going to go, if it's time after time from Paul, if we're going to go Cyndi Lauper, two things. Show your true colours. Show your purpose, show what you're about, and make sure they're aligned to it. And remember that girls and boys want to have fun. And the fun bit is why people stay. And Paul, you said it about Alfred Marks. You stayed the 11 years because it was fun.
It was a lot of fun.
So if there's a sense of purpose, there's a sense of fun, and you're giving people time, whether they know who Cyndi Lauper is or not, and they won't, that's what I do.
There's not a lot I can say to that, Dave.
That. It's not possible to follow that.
There's not a lot I can say to that, Dave. But you're right. It was a lot of fun in the respect of a girl or a boy. It was always a lot of fun in the early days. I think I'm going to go back to the thing I said right at the beginning, is that you've got to stick to your values and stick to your principles, and don't take shortcuts. If you want to get an investment from your staff and they want to invest by you, then surround yourself with people who have the same values, the same ideas, and the same behavioral sets that you have. Make sure they've got different skill sets that you can engage across the business, and look to employ that. Don't take shortcuts. And it really is about don't take shortcuts, because too many people take shortcuts on recruitment by recruiting people based on skills. And basically what happens is that they end up being a really poisonous egg within the business and start to poison the business. And it's not just what time you spend with them, it's what damage they do to other people. So I think, to me, I'd go back to stick to your values and stick to your principles and recruit around those values and principles. From there. So that's it for the first webinar back. Always good to start with a nice easy one. Next week we're going to start with a really simple one. Next week we're going to talk about how to raise your client fees without the client batting an eyelid. Well, I'm sure they will flutter a little bit and maybe screw up a little bit when we start to raise their fees, but I think it's something we should talk about, because people are a little bit scared at the moment to talk about increasing fees, especially with the situation in the country at the moment with the cost of living, etc. But we've got to make sure that we are charging the right fees to clients and making sure we're getting paid for the right work that we do. So I'm going to leave it there. Ladies and gents, welcome back. Let's have a massive 2023, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Paul, Dave, thanks very much.
Take care, everybody. Have a good week. All the best. Bye now.
Bye.